Hello, Richard.
Hello.
That's a great sound on your end. Are you in the loo?
No, I'm not. I'm in my dressing room.
It sounds like the loo.
Well, I mean, it's not much bigger than a loo, to be honest.
Fair enough. Has it got a loo in it?
Join me. Sorry?
Has it got a loo in it?
Yes, it has got a loo. And
Sorry,
a shower.
do carry on. Where are we joining you?
I was going to say, you join me, as you well know, Jamie, between shows here at the Bloomsbury Theatre.
That is very exciting. And you're wearing that nice jumper that I like as well.
Yeah, you do like it. You're quite fond of this one, aren't you?
Yeah, it's very nice.
I should have bought you one for Christmas, but I didn't think.
Never mind.
That's me all over, isn't it?
It is. I was really hoping to see you in full cross-dressing
I know.
get-up.
It's disappointing. But of course, it has to come off between shows. I have to have a shower as soon as I get off stage because I'm dripping with sweat. And the costume is always soaking wet as well. So I have another costume to put on in about 20 minutes for our next show.
Oh my goodness me, Richard! And you're amazingly managing to squeeze this in.
Of course. Shows.
So shall we get on with our...
No, Jamie, you've got that the wrong way round. I'm amazingly managing to squeeze 2 shows in around doing the podcast.
Okay, fine. You've got your priorities right. I'm sure the production company would be thrilled to know that's your attitude.
I'm sure they would be.
Shall we get on with Pod 29?
Yes, the New Year's Eve special. Great.
We should say that again. The New Year's Eve special in unison.
Yes.
Should we say that now?
Go on then. The New Year's Eve special.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is Christmas Control. Stand by. Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
The Gerry Anderson Podcast with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
What are you eating?
Well,
your lunch.
You'll have to excuse me. Yeah, of course I'm eating my lunch. I need to have something to eat before I go back on stage.
Yes.
So actually, I've got some leftovers. My daughter had a Christmas party a couple of nights ago and invited 13 of her friends.
Gosh.
And massively overcooked, luckily for me, because it means I get soft pigs in blankets and chicken and roast potatoes and parsnips to bring to work every day. It's all right, isn't it?
So hungry. Oh, that's great.
Delicious. So you will have to forgive me if I,
It's fine.
Yeah.
You've got 20 minutes. Now 18 minutes and
I
you've
know.
got to eat.
I know.
So what are you doing? Who are you and why are we here?
Well, I'm Richard James and you are?
Jamie Anderson.
And we're here for the rather truncated, I think it's fair to say, New Year's Eve edition of the podcast. If you'll forgive us, dear listener. Simply because we don't have that much time, do we?
No, we don't. And also, to give us a bit of a break and to give the listeners a break from us talking nonsense.
That's right.
Now, Richard, because you don't have your script.
Yeah. Yes, I don't have my script.
I will have to prompt you.
You will. You'll have to guide me through.
So, Richard, isn't it interesting that we've had a Christmas Eve and a New Year's Eve edition this year? Yes,
I saw this on the script that you laughingly called a script that you sent to me earlier, which I haven't been able to access since, and you said this won't happen for another something years.
It won't happen again for 11 years. It won't happen again until Christmas 2029.
I mean, you're assuming there, Jamie, that we'll still be doing
yes, if we were still doing the podcast in 11 years' time, it wouldn't happen until then. But these are the only Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve editions of the podcast that will happen in the next decade.
That's amazing.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Isn't that an exciting stat?
It is exciting. And I shall be pushing close to my 60th birthday when we reach that next milestone, let me tell you.
That is amazing.
Isn't it?
Well, let's hope, Rich?
That we're both still here, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So here we are. Obviously, we say it's a truncated edition. We do have all the regulars. Don't panic. We've got a fantastic interview, Jamie, that you'll tell us more about in a moment, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We've got one email that I'm going to read out that I think is rather special that we've received in the last week. A few people have tweeted in with some fun and games, which I'll mention. And also, of course, Chris Dale will be here later on with his hashtag Randomizer.
Is it hashtag now?
It is now.
The hashtag Randomizer on the hashtag Gerry Anderson podcast.
Yes, which of course you can also shorten to GAP. I've only just realised as I was writing some notes earlier. The GAP, Mind the Gap.
Yeah, I have a feeling there might be another company called that though.
Oh, so we better stick with it,
Yeah, let's stick with the long
Fair enough, yeah.
Oh, here you go. Now, Richard, you mentioned the interview.
Yeah.
With Sean Feast about Lionel Anderson.
Yes.
It's a really good one. and I think you're all going to thoroughly enjoy it. At least I really hope you do. Oh dear, Rich has dropped a bit of...
just a bit of potato. No, I am listening. I'm sorry to appear rude.
It's very exciting.
Now, how did you first meet Sean?
We kind of try and work it out in the podcast interview itself.
Yeah.
But essentially, I went out and said, God, we've got this amazing book of letters from Lionel back to the family, which actually chart all sorts of interesting stuff, including probably how Dad was inspired to go into the film industry, and also how Lionel would eventually inspire characters like Scott Tracy and Steve Zodiac and Troy Tempest and many others. So I went out and talked to people, and eventually I was introduced to Sean. Sean said, "Blooming heck, this is marvellous. Look at this amazing collection of stuff. I'd love to do it." And then we found a publisher who Sean already knew, and the rest is history. So we're going to hear all about Lionel's life and sad death. But I think it does have an overall positive message, an amazing life lived in a very short, truncated way. And inspired some of the stuff that you love. So, an exciting interview, really different to what we had before.
Nothing wrong with having a little more sort of contemplative tone to a New Year's Eve, I don't think. It's quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So in the meantime, of course, you can always get in touch with us, as ever, podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Now Christmas and the New Year is almost out the way. I'm sure you'll have plenty of time on your hands to let us know how you spent the festive period. Those of you that joined in on our hashtag Cheers Gerry Anderson, thank you for all those lovely pictures and tweets that you tweeted. I tweeted one myself, you may have seen.
I did. It was a nice one, Richard.
It was, yes, do get in touch. And, of course, you can tweet us as well. Richard N. James, and I'm Jamie Anderson. Also, Chris Dalek, and also Terry Adlam, who appeared on the last podcast as well in interview form. I'd love to hear from you.
Sean D. Feast for this one.
Great.
If you want to thank Sean, I think he mentions it at the end of his interview, but just in case, there you go.
And do hashtag us Gerry Anderson Podcast so we can pick up your tweets as well. And in the meantime, of course, I have to say this, don't I, Jamie? Do remember to leave a nice review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Don't forget to subscribe so that you get notifications that every time a new podcast arrives, and share and rate as well, so we know just how much you're enjoying it.
All those things, thank you. And yes, and we will announce the winner of the random review thing in our first of January 2019 podcast.
Yes, good. Yes, a lot of people were waiting with bated breath for that. That's very good. Excellent. Nice way to start the new year. Lovely. Good.
So that's it. So look, Richard, I'm going to skip the news this week.
Of course.
Because there's a general, sort of shutdown across Christmas.
Well, and also, no one can beat, Big Al's Thunderbirds rendition of News.
No.
Can they?
Nobody has tried. So as yet, we have to say that nobody can.
That's true. But of course, there is lots of news coming up, of course. I mean, in the next few weeks, no doubt, we'll be inundated with new stuff from the Gerry Anderson universe. I mean, if you think 2018 has been a good year...
just you wait for 2019. There's all sorts of crazy stuff coming which you're going to enjoy. It doesn't really matter what series you love, there'll be something out there for you.
That's right, it's fantastic.
Stay tuned for 2019. I hope you're all doing something nice this evening for New Year's Eve.
Yes, what are you planning tonight, Jamie?
I'm planning bed by 9.
Are you now?
with a cup of hot chocolate.
Yes, are you?
Yeah, I really am. I'm so knackered. Just sleep. I mean, you must feel the same after performances.
Yeah, we're lucky. We've just got the afternoon show to do, and then we have the evening off, actually. So I might hang around in town and maybe catch the fireworks, or I might trundle on home and go out for a quiet drink with the other half. That might be quite nice.
Oh, so nice. Well, enjoy that. Richly deserved.
Well, thank you very much. Likewise. Enjoy your hot chocolate.
Oh, I will. Actually, I just realised I haven't got any hot chocolate, so I have to go and buy some.
Curses.
Anyway, look, Richard, so we're skipping over the news, which is good because it gives me a rest. So you picked out a specific listener email you wanted to read out. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do some tweets? What's your... take it away, Richard James.
Oh, wow. It's all mine at last.
It's all about you.
We have indeed had a few tweets. Let's catch up with a few things that people have been tweeting us over the past week or so. Jay, the time being, tweeted to us saying, listening today to the Gerry Anderson podcast in December sunshine at home next to Deal Pier with a bag of chips.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw that. You posted a lovely picture on Twitter. Beautiful sunshine, lovely day.
That all sounds rather nice.
Yeah, it's very nice. Michael Horgan said, safe to say you'll be closing the year with a lot to reflect on, indeed. The success of the Gerry Anderson podcast, Connecting the World. Yes, that's been lovely. The Firestorm Greenlight, epic events, and the Gerry Anderson store providing great merch.
Merch.
Coming on nicely, isn't it? We also had a tweet, from one of our more royal listeners, Jamie. I don't know if you've seen this. It's been transcribed by Robert, who tweets us occasionally, but I think another impression might be due.
You ready? Are you get Terry Adlam in for this, or are you doing it?
No, I'm doing it right now. You ready?
Good luck, listeners.
Greetings to all my loyal and trusty subjects. One appears to you this year in order to make a very rare royal decree. I command all of my subjects, rich or poor, to listen to the Gerry Anderson podcast and to watch Fab Live with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
Not offensive at all, was it?
Wow. If we haven't lost half of our listeners after that, then...
Yes. I can only guess who that might have been, but it seems we're reaching quite high circles with this podcast, Jamie.
Yeah. I mean, that was...
Barbara Windsor.
Miriam Margolyes, I was going to say, wasn't it?
Thank you, Robert, for sending that. And also CJ said, another great Gerry Anderson podcast. Now, he's referring to Chris's last Randomizer with the Thunderbirds Christmas episode. He said, yes, it does lack something, but it's an episode that should be seen over the festive period. And it's a shame Captain Scarlet never had one. Perhaps featuring an evil Santa, maybe.
An evil Santa? Well, Captain Scarlet didn't have one, but new Captain Scarlet did. Sort of. So
yeah.
if you want to see our top 5 Christmas episodes counted down, go onto the Gerry Anderson YouTube channel.
Great.
Or just search Gerry Anderson Christmas on YouTube and you'll find it there.
Nice.
But yes, there is a new Scarlet one, which is a snowy setting, and Captain Black and Destiny Angel sat by the tree.
Right.
Christmas tree, obviously.
Yeah, yes.
Anyway, it's worth a watch.
Lovely.
And obviously there's a Terrorhawks one.
Great, yeah, absolutely. And do let us know at home which episodes you watched over the festive period. And a lot of you settled down with your box sets and your old episodes to pour over Christmas and New Year. So let us know which ones brought you the most festive joy.
Lovely. What a lovely set of tweets, Richard.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Very kind of you to say. I'd also like
to cut that jumper, isn't it?
I'd like to this lovely letter that we had, or email.
Yes, because this is the only one you've chosen for this special edition.
Yeah, well, it's quite a long one, but I thought it was worth saying. So for me, it sort of sums up the experience, I think, of many Gerry Anderson fans out there. This is from Alex K, who emailed in with actually a merchandise idea. But Alex, with your permission, I'd like to save that for a future podcast, maybe in the next one. But for now, I'd like to just concentrate on the meat of your email. He says, a dear Three Musketeers, that's obviously me, you and Chris, I would think. Nice. He said, as a child and teenager who grew up with a stammer, numerous health difficulties and had to cope with his parents' divorce and deal with the usual kinds of bullying at school, characters such as Marina, Brains, Captain Scarlet, both classic and new, Joe 90, sorry Jamie, Ed Straker, Tiger Neinstein and Sproggle from Lavender Castle, yes, you read that correctly, had a profound impact on my outlook and helped me to deal with life's obstacles. The man behind the magic himself, Gerry Anderson, also had a huge effect on shaping my character. The highlight, however, had to be when I read his biography, What Made Thunderbirds Go, as a 14-year-old contemplating a future in media. I, of course, knew all about the success Gerry enjoyed in the 60s and early 70s, but I had no idea he had such a rough time in the latter part of the 70s and even the early 80s. It was extremely humbling to learn that this magnificent man, who I and many others consider a pop culture icon, on a par with Stan Lee, would have to return to his roots as a sound editor to make ends meet and even worry for a time about paying bills. Reading the portion of the book dealing with that little-known aspect of Gerry's life was a lesson that a younger me took to heart when thinking about a career in the media. If a legend like Gerry could fall on hard times, then it could happen to anyone. I consider Gerry to be one of my greatest mentors, and that by far that was the best lesson I ever learned from him. One more thing I admire about your dad, Jamie, was that he kept working pretty much right up until the end. Aside from my parents, I guess that's where I get my workaholism from. I honestly love that Gerry would always plough forward, never looking back, and kept creating. I can think of no better example for a creative person to follow. Indeed, one of my favourite bits about the podcast, Jamie, is whenever you tell stories about your father working from home and never being able to take a day off. Yeah, isn't that lovely?
That is lovely.
And
excellent.
I think that's a sentiment that's probably echoed in Gerry Anderson's fan homes around the world. I mean, we hear so many people being inspired by his work. And it's not the thing that struck me about that. They're not just TV programs, are they? That's the thing.
No, they go much further than that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure. Thank you very much for that, Alex. By the way, and thanks, Richard, for picking it. It's a great choice.
Yes.
I'm sure I mentioned it before when we were at London Film Comic Con. A chap came up to the table and expressed very similar sentiments.
Yeah.
about having a terrible time being moved from foster home to foster home as a kid, and always being able to cling on to the kind of the positivity and the escapism of the shows.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to hear. So if you have any more stories like that, we love to hear them. So please do share.
Yes. Thank you.
Rich will do a marvellous job of reading them out.
Oh, well, I'll try. I'll might even throw in an impression if you're lucky. So thank you very much, Alex, and a very, very happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for sending that in. And like I say, I will endeavour to mention your fantastic merch idea in a future podcast. We'll come back to that later.
I look forward to hearing that.
Yes. So there we are, Jamie. So is it time already to head to your rather wonderful and interesting interview?
Yeah, I think it is. So look, this is an unabridged, unedited chat with Sean Feast, who is a PR man normally, but is also a military historian, particularly focusing on aviation, the RAF. Yeah. There is so much to Lionel's story. I really think it's worth you having a listen, and as you go through, even before, sometimes I'll try and sort of draw threads out that then affected Dad in later life. Yeah. But quite often I haven't done it, because if you just sort of start examining what's being talked about, you will see all these little elements which influence Dad's life and career and all the shows you enjoy. So really, really fascinating. Something which wasn't spoken about enough. Dad found it too painful to discuss for the biography.
Right.
So some stuff you may not have heard.
Yeah.
So settle down, have a mug of tea or something, get cosy on the sofa under a blanket and listening, because we've got nearly an hour with Sean Feast talking about Dad's late brother, Lionel Anderson.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sean Feast. I'm actually, these days, I work in PR and advertising, but I was a journalist, and my love of stories and storytelling has led me to write lots of books on the RAF, and I wrote a particular book that I was particularly pleased with as well, all about the life of Lionel Anderson, which I believe is what we're going to be chatting about today.
Yes, I'm not going to throw a curveball and say we're chatting about something else. It's called a Thunderbird at Bomber Command, right?
Indeed, a Thunderbird in Bomber Command, to be very precise.
Oh, I thought it was at. That's terrible, isn't it?
It's terrible.
I've misplaced my copy, that's why. Anyway, so Sean, I'm just trying to think back, actually, how we were put in touch. It was via Steve, the publisher, right? And that came through a securities route, or was it some other way? I can't remember.
There was somebody you knew called Colin Higgs. And Colin, I think you'd approached him and had a chat with him, and he's a guy who's also written various books, and he mentioned it to me because it was sort of more in the line of books that I look to write, and so we met up. I seem to remember we met up at a cafe in Henley to have a little chat, and you bought some fabulous photographs and the books and all the handwritten letters, and I have to say, as soon as I looked at it, I just knew straight away, A, it was something I really wanted to write, and B, it was something that I thought a publisher would be interested in, and as usual, I was right on both counts, Jamie.
Always right, Sean. The life of a PR man, right?
I can say that because my wife's out at the moment, so of course I'm always right.
Take every opportunity you can.
Absolutely.
So I should just say that these letters and bits and pieces were a shock discovery for us at home. So not long after Dad died, I started clearing out some bits and pieces, including a sort of a big pine chest of stuff which I'd never seen before, but I just opened it and went, oh, there's loads of photos in here, and I started digging down, and it was sort of 2 feet deep just of paperwork and photographs and all sorts of stuff, and at the very, very, very bottom were these 2 books of handwritten bits and pieces, and I had no idea what they were. I started reading through, and they were transcriptions of letters from Lionel Anderson, Dad's brother, sent home to his mum, Deborah, and Deborah had painstakingly handwritten out every letter, and included some miniaturized versions, which you'll tell me about what they are in a minute. And they were just so fascinating. I started reading them and came across all sorts of interesting bits and pieces, mostly about Lionel arriving in Canada and being shocked that they had bananas and cream there. But they were just so cool. We had to do something with them, and so that's.
I mean, those letters were clearly lovingly transcribed as well, weren't they? You sort of got a sense of the history of what you were reading, what you were confronted with, and you're absolutely right. What she had done was pasted in, I think they're called aerographs, I think, which are effectively miniaturized letters. And they were clearly done during the war because of the tens of thousands of letters that soldiers and aircrew and the like would send. It was a way of miniaturizing them in such a way that clearly they could send out that volume. Obviously, they test my eyes these days, but within each of those, there's often a little nugget of information as well. So it was important to read both the transcribed letters and indeed all the additional bits and pieces that she'd added. I think the only thing that I found testing in amongst them all was what she had done is transcribed not only the letters that Lionel had sent her, but she'd also transcribed letters from friends or other family members. So it was deciphering who they were from, what they related to, so we could sort of piece it all together in the right sort of chronology, as it were.
Yeah. So a mammoth task, actually. You had to do quite a lot of retranscribing, right?
That's absolutely right. I must. Can I just big up my mother here, by the way, because sadly my mum's not very well at the moment, but she did a sterling job. She was, without question, in her prime, the fastest typist in the country.
Amazing.
And so I got my mum to literally type up all of the letters so that what I was looking at then was a typewritten script, which is obviously an awful lot easier then to start working with from an editing perspective. So thank you, Mum, if you're listening.
Thanks, Sean's mum. Yeah, lovely job. So we should just go back to the beginning. Who was Lionel Anderson? Do you remember? I'm not going to go for his exact birthday. Born in 1922, right?
Yeah, in Westcliff-on-Sea, I believe, if I remember rightly. Yeah.
Yes, because I not long ago went to Westcliff, and I'd completely forgotten that fact.
Yeah, it's a funny old place, but I'm sure if you're there, you love it.
Well, I went to a local school there where a teacher was retiring, and he's a huge Anderson fan, and he knew the whole Westcliff-on-Sea connection anyway. So, yeah.
So, Lionel was born there, had a challenging upbringing, I think it's fair to say, in terms of never really being an awful lot of money in the house. But he did well at school, and he obviously did well enough at school to, when war came, and he volunteered for aircrew to be accepted for aircrew training and to be accepted for pilot training. They didn't just take anybody, and certainly by the time he volunteered as well, they were often turning away people who wanted to be pilots. When I say turning away, they were offering them other roles. As navigators, as bomb aimers, and what have you, within the various aircrew categories. So he must have been there or thereabouts in terms of his ability, his educational ability, his attitude. He must have been a very likable character as well, because there was an awful lot of snobbery in the RAF at that time. So actually, to get on, you had to be a certain type in order to get on. Not a sort of gung-ho type of approach, but just a very positive attitude. So I think he was clearly a very driven man from what I can gather and what I know of his contemporaries as well. He would have been delighted. He would have been thrilled at the prospect of going overseas to do his training. Just to put that into context, if you can imagine, this is 1941. We've been at war for a couple of years. The country is effectively blacked out. There's no lights on at any stage during the night for obvious reasons.
Yep.
Training aircrew in those sort of scenarios was next to impossible. So what they did, thanks to a particular training scheme that they'd set up, an Empire training scheme, a sort of international flying training scheme, was they sent our young pilots or fledgling pilots overseas. So they sent them to Rhodesia, as was, Zimbabwe as is. They sent them to South Africa. They sent them to Canada, and they also sent them to America. For obvious reasons, it's a hell of a lot safer over there. No one was shooting at them. So
that sounds very reasonable.
So you can imagine for a young boy who basically hasn't really moved more than sort of 10, 15 miles from where he was born, to suddenly find himself on a battered old cruise liner heading off across the Atlantic. I mean, that must have been one hell of an adventure. Yeah. He's 19, 20 years of age. What an adventure that must have been. I mean, it must have just been so exciting to find yourself going to a foreign country. And out of all the foreign countries you're going to as well, he's picked to go to out to America. Now, in those days, you obviously reached America via Canada. It was one of those points, and then it involved a long, long train journey. I think it took 4 or 5 days of a train journey. But again, it must have been magnificent to go through all that, beautiful countryside. That it would have been bloody cold over there, obviously in Canada. And you can see from some of the photos that are in the book and some of the photos you showed me, just the amount of snow that's out there and how cold it is. But then to be traveling right the way across Canada, then down through America, down to Arizona. So you've got those two extremes. You've got the cold and the snow, and suddenly you've got this wonderful sort of desert and heat and everything that's going on. And as he so rightly picked up on, he's come from war-torn England, where food is being rationed. There's not a lot going on. An orange was something that, you could only dream of. And suddenly he's thrust into this country where they're having things that they never had before, like maple syrup as well. So he's suddenly experiencing all of these foods that he could only dream about, foods that he'd only probably seen in the movies. And suddenly he's there. Suddenly it's all happening. So it must have just been fantastic at that point.
Yeah, a wonderful assault on the senses all round, I guess, for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to try and get into our heads. I think we so take it for granted these days. We can jump on an aeroplane and travel anywhere. We can get food when we want it. We can drink when we want, whatever. But this was an entirely different world. So so he found himself in the sunniest part of America. He could have found himself in all sorts of different air schools out in the US, and he probably had one of the best in terms of the weather.
It was just a kind of random assignment based on where there was space for training and where they set up a facility, yeah?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You literally just looked on the posting board one day and found out where you were going, and he was off to a place called Falcon Field, which I think was number 4 flying training school. So it's run as an RAF school, but it's effective, and the boss man, for want of a better word, is an RAF man, and a couple of the senior officers are RAF people. But other than that, it's basically run by Americans, and all of the instructors are actually American civilians. They're civilian instructors. So again, that's quite an odd sort of setup for a man who, he will have been through initial training. So he'll have done his square bashing, as they call it. He would have learned about service life, which was, pretty harsh, pretty well disciplined in those days, as is today. And then he would have suddenly found himself in the middle of nowhere in a foreign land with Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so. It's a very different setup again. I'm not pretending it wasn't lax, but it just very, very different in terms of discipline.
Completely different approach. So in those early letters when he's traveling, obviously we get a lot of reports of the food and that sort of stuff. Did you get any sense of Lionel and Dad's relationship from those early letters? Because I know there are quite a lot of little asides in the letters.
That's absolutely right. You definitely get that feeling because And that's a really good word. They are like little asides. There's you get a lengthy letter, and then there's one quick reference that says something like, Gerry, you would have loved the whatever. He'll pick on something. So he obviously always had Gerry in his mind but you also get the sense that this is Big Brother. He is the big brother, and his little brother, he's slightly adopting a note of superiority.
Yeah.
But you know, being one of three brothers, I can totally relate to that, and being the youngest as well. But you also get a sense, actually, the more I think about this, you get a sense that as the letters progress, they become slightly less, I don't mean patronising, but they're slightly less superior and slightly warmer. Actually, you know, you sense that maybe while he's having the time of his life out there, he would love Gerry to be sharing that with him, you know, and the excitement of seeing the aircraft. And I mean, if you've never flown an aircraft before, then the first aircraft you see and the first aircraft you go up in is to you, it's like it's a fighter aircraft. It's the fastest. It's got the greatest rate of climbing. You know, it's just fantastic. And he is clearly relaying some of that sense of excitement to Gerry, which is lovely to read.
Yeah, there is something like there was clearly a two-way respect going on, because Dad always described Lionel as his hero brother. You know, he was absolutely on a pedestal for the whole family. And yeah, you definitely get that two-way sense going on. There is that element of hero worship, but there's also that element of sort of almost not understanding, but it's almost a wonderful sort of an amazement, a bewilderment of what's happening to everything that's going on at the time, but really nicely in a positive way, rather than, because as I say, we're in the middle of a war here. So, but you still get that sense that there's still fun, there's still joy in life to be had, and I think that's really well communicated in those letters. Lovely. There's a turning point actually in the letters I seem to remember, which is where Lionel is asking Dad about what he's doing, kind of not work-wise, but sort of what, you know, where he's going to go work-wise, and there's mentions of building school and all the stuff that's been well recorded about Dad.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's very well remembered. Actually, I'm not sure I'd have remembered that myself. But
there you go.
You're very good. You paid attention at some point. Yes, that's right. And he tells him to work hard and to focus on things that he's good at. And
yes,
he talks about construction or architecture or something along those lines, which I think is fascinating, given what your father went on to do and his genius at creating things. I think there's an early sign there about Gerry's creativity. And as I say, I don't think that's over-interpreting. I think it's pretty much there to be read, which I found that fabulous.
Absolutely. And also I remember that I think in that same letter, possibly one of those letters where Lionel says basically that he wants Dad to make lots of money so that Lionel could be kept in his old age.
Yeah, that's right.
Something like that. So there's a really, really lovely relationship there. That is what one of the early signs. That one of the key things that came out of all this for Thunderbirds fans was the naming issue.
Yeah, very definitely. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it's always been. Whenever I've read up about it historically, there has been a tendency to say that the word Thunderbirds, or the concept of Thunderbird and Thunderbirds, came from the fact that the airfield they were on was called Thunderbird Field, and it's true, the airfield was called Thunderbird Field. I think it was one of two or three airfields that had that sort of sobriquet, as it were. But in RAF days, it was never known as Thunderbird Field. It was always known as Falcon Field. The RAF named all of their flying training schools out there at the time after birds of prey. So it was known as Falcon Field. So when you read his letters, there is not a single mention of Thunderbirds in relation to the airfield. It's only ever referred to as Falcon Field. So that sort of made me think, well, you know, it's obviously not quite as straightforward as previous commentators have suggested. And then, of course, we come to the absolute crux, which was that while he was there, Hollywood came to town, literally, and decided that this was the perfect location to film a movie, which was a sort of romanticized, flying, former World War I fighter pilot, daring do, falls in love with the girl. This is was it Robert Preston and Gene Tierney, who were sort of the big names of the time, and there they all are. And what's the name they give to this wonderful film? They call it Thunderbirds. So, of course, Lionel starts writing in his letters about this film that's come to town, and it's called Thunderbirds. So the key reference, there is no reference to the airfield at all. It's always called Falcon Field. It's never referred to as Thunderbird. But the very definite reference, which we can clearly see in the letters and which we talk about in the book, is this film Thunderbird. And again, can you imagine what it must be like? So he's come all this way. He's found himself in America, not far from Hollywood, actually. And Hollywood comes to town. These are the big actors of the time. The film sets are there. The crew's all there. They've got the lights. They've got the camera. They've got mock-up aircraft on the ground. And to cap it all, they're asked to take part in the film as extras. So you've got Lionel and his chums all in their best Air Force blue, and they're doing march pasts because this is a little bit of a rabble-rousing propaganda type of film as well. For example, they managed to weave in 3 Chinese pilots. Well, I can assure you there were no Chinese pilots at Falcon Field at the time Lionel was there. I don't know what happened subsequently, but they definitely weren't there at the time. But again, it was trying to suggest something from a propaganda perspective. But there are some wonderful photos. Again, some of them are in the book, some of them that you've seen as well, that we couldn't necessarily use, but of Lionel and his chums with all the big film stars. He has that wonderful photo as well that signs to him from it is Robert Preston, isn't it? I'm just getting slightly concerned now that I'm confusing him with the commentator on the the TV at the moment. Sorry, I'm just having a quick look. But he's got the whole thing sort of signed up and autographed to him. I mean, what a wonderful thing to actually possess.
Yeah. From your pseudo flying instructor or something, doesn't he say? It's signed from him, something like that.
Well, I'm trying to find it. I will find it over the course of this conversation.
Well, we can always correct it, so it's fine.
Yeah, well done.
But an amazing experience for Lionel. But not only is that name of the film embedded in Dad's memory forever, but also I think one of the most exciting things is, as far as I can see, and again, I don't think it's reading too much into it, is that from this point forward, all the talk of the glamour of filmmaking and the excitement of it, that must be the point at which Dad's imagination is fired, and he's going away from thinking about building and architecture and that sort of stuff and thinking about,
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt to that. I don't think that's not over-interpreting. That's not trying to look for a meaning that isn't there. When you read the letters and when you read the parts of the letters that are in the book, you will absolutely get a sense that the excitement that Lionel is feeling is literally going across the pond. Yes. To Gerry, and you can sense that excitement between the pair of them. It's actually a shared experience as well, that this is overwhelmingly exciting, and it must be exciting. Think we all do the same, don't we? We see a bit of filming going on. If you're in London, you see a bit of filming, you can't help but stop and look at it. There was some filming going on, strangely enough, in the village that I live for a big movie. Recently, for some reason, they use our place as a bit of a location for various shoots. And we're seeing sort of well-known American actors walking on your village green. And of course, you're going to stop and look. And of course, you then, in these days, you share it on Facebook, you tell everyone about it. Well, that's exactly what's happening to Lionel, but in spades. he's not only just seeing these people at a glance, he's actually socializing with them. Because what happens a little bit later is him and some of his pals actually do a good old-fashioned hitchhike to Hollywood. And when they get to Hollywood, they literally go, yeah, we've come to see Robert Preston because he said if we were ever in town, we should pop in and say hello. Now, if you did that today in Hollywood, I think you'd probably be put inside as a lunatic.
Exactly.
But of course, he turns up with his chums, and sure enough, Robert Preston comes out, Gene Tierney is around. They get introduced to all of the great and the good in Hollywood at that time. They go around the film sets. There's some fabulous photos of the Wild West film sets, the pirate ships and what have you. Again, this is like fantasy. This is dreamland.
Yeah.
And again, some of this is being communicated to Gerry. Now, I would hope, the bit we don't know, of course, is, but I would imagine they did. I would imagine Lionel then shared all those photos with Gerry when he got back. I suppose that's something we'd never really talked about or explored, but I would have thought common sense says he would have sat down one day with Gerry and just gone through those albums and gone through those photos, because he was a prolific, as well as being a prolific letter writer, he was also a prolific photographer. I mean, he took hundreds of photographs, didn't he? I mean,
and they're great.
And they are absolutely fabulous photos.
Yeah, including some early colour pictures as well. There are a couple there, aren't they?
There's a couple of really good, there's a really nice one of him, isn't there, in his sort of American, in his US type fatigue, which is a fabulous, fabulous photo. Yeah. When you think about these days, there's this drive towards colorizing everything. Well, here's a genuine colour photo, a contemporary photo. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. But,
Did I imagine it, Sean, or in one, excuse me, or in one of those letters, did they also say that when they did the tour around Fox, it was Fox, wasn't it? The studio.
Yeah, I think so.
That they met Judy Garland as well.
Yeah, they did. They met. I can't remember all the names, but they met whoever the big stars were at the time. There was a Norwegian ice skater, beauty, who tickled somebody. I can't remember who whatever. Maybe that's something I really should look up. But they met some really big names and household names at the time. So
which must have been incredible. So not only was Dad getting these letters back saying there are these amazing, exciting things happening. I'm in a film. There's definitely a bit where he says, I'm pretty sure that film's going to make it across the pond. So make sure you go and see it, and you might see me. But then he was compounding it later on by saying, not only is this incredibly glamorous if you're part of it, but if you make it to Hollywood, kid, then you're going to hang around with the greats.
Oh yeah, absolutely right. And again, it's that sort of sense of hope and that wonderful sort of naivety that sort of says that when this war's all over, he'll be back. Because Robert and Gene, they're his pals. And they, as I say, I mean, hats off to the Americans at that time and Hollywood at that time, because they fully embraced the RAFM and the British air crews, etc. As indeed, it's important to point out, so too did the locals. So the local families that were close to the airfield. Lionel was fully embraced into the local Jewish community as well, which was obviously important to him. His faith was clearly very important to him. And through that, he got introduced to also all the best-looking girls, which clearly was not a hardship to him. That comes across in his letters as well. I think all due credit to the way that they did embrace our troops, our men at that time. I think that's a great credit to them as well, and perhaps something that doesn't get talked about often enough. Actually, we're a bit fast to criticise our friends across the pond, aren't we? And we forget just how good they were at things like that for us.
Absolutely. Well, and Lionel embraced them right back. I mean, he was quite a handsome chap.
He was a fine-looking young buzzard, I think it's fair to say.
That's probably what they were. Absolutely. But I'm pretty sure at least 10 or 12 different names of young ladies across the letters.
The letters are regularly populated by different girls' names, it's true to say. And also the photos, 1 minute he's with, and these are all good-looking girls, okay? These are none of these photos are just taken because he's having to be polite. He is quite clearly well enamoured with one or two of them. And I think one or two of them might have sort of broken his heart for all of a couple of hours before he moved on to the next one. But again, I guess it just adds to that whole sense of excitement and fun, what have you, in the context of some dreadful things going on globally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a weird contrast, actually, all this tale of this lovely stuff and actually what he's being prepared for and what is to come, and obviously what we eventually know happens. It's sort of quite dark in a way.
It is. Well, I guess it's the contrast, isn't it? It's the contrast between this fantastic, fun life over here, and then back to the very, very harsh reality of war, over here, which had to inevitably follow.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he loved the whole flying training. He absolutely loved it. It's a bit like a university course in a way, because again, he expresses in his letters that it's not just about flying. For those who don't really understand what happens in flying training, there's as much ground school instruction as there is flying training. So there are exams, there are good old-fashioned exams which you have to SWAT for and you have to pass. Because you will not get your wings, your coveted wings, when you finally qualify, unless you also pass all the written tests that are put your way. So you can be the most fantastic pilot on the planet, but if you can't actually do calculus or whatever it is they're expected to do, then you're stuck. Which is why, as I say, like I said earlier in the podcast, it's that they took the more intelligent pupils. Because it was a very demanding job physically and mentally.
So he was very bright, he was handsome, a great photographer, a prolific letter writer, became friends with the Hollywood stars. I mean, this guy...
You've got to hate him, really.
I mean, in many ways, I cannot stand him already, but you can see how he was such a positive influence in Dad's life in that way.
Oh, totally. Well, he had almost a film star look about him as well, because again, contemporary photos with his moustache, the inevitable obligatory required RAF moustache going on, gave him a sort of Errol Flynn type of look as well. So yeah, he was a very debonair, very good looking fella.
Yeah, God, yeah, I really do hate him now. And I'm pretty sure that he wrote back with a couple of kind of disaster stories, although they were told in a positive way. Was there somebody doing a kind of belly up landing or something like that?
Yeah, someone managed to flip their aircraft, which, again, he took a fantastic photo of. I think he took a photo because it was one of those crashes where the guy walked away. So it was okay. I don't think they'd have rushed to be taking photos of anything too serious.
Of course.
But no, there were instances, and sadly, while he was there, flying training is a dangerous thing, even in the relatively benign conditions that they were flying within. It's still dangerous, and a couple of the aircrew were killed in flying training. And again, that would have brought home to Lionel that in amongst all this fun, there's something serious going on as well. You couldn't be cavalier about it by any means. But he loved it when he moved on from. He flew a very basic training aircraft first, called a Stearman, which is a little bit like our Tiger Moth. I mean, it's not exactly by any means. So I don't want all the aviation geeks on the phone straight away to me, or if they do, they can direct everything through you.
Fine,
perfect. But he went from a relatively staid and safe initial aircraft to something which was a little bit more powerful with a radial engine, and that must have been really exciting. That must have been a real sort of step up. And then he's ultimately on the something called a Harvard, which is it's got retractable undercarriage, it's got a closed canopy, it's got all of those things which actually, given that anybody training to be a pilot at that time wanted to fly Spitfires, it's as close as you're going to get before you actually get to go in a Spitfire yourself. So the excitement and you can sense that excitement as he's moving on, but he also details just how many hours he's having to do. And, sometimes it's 40, 50, 60 hours before he can move on to the next aircraft. Well, actually, that's quite a long time in terms of flying. and all of the things that you have to learn. This isn't just about taking it up and taking it down again. You're responsible for all the navigation. You're responsible for the general sort of health of the aircraft itself. You have a responsibility to check over that aircraft as well. So it's a very responsible job. It's not just sort of, charge up, strap your parachute, jump in and off you go. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes prior to any of that happening.
A lot more than just tally-ho chaps, off we go.
I'm afraid so. All those movies you've watched, like or whatever, I'm afraid it's a bit more complex than that.
Understandably. So he does all this training. He does very well because he's so bright and wonderful and all that sort of stuff. He comes back.
Yep.
What does he go into? What is his eventual place in the RAF?
Well, one of the things that, again, if you can imagine, when you're out in America and you're flying over a desert, or you're out in South Africa and what have you, flying is actually comparatively easy insofar as you're not being shot at, which I'm not joking about. You're not being shot at. There's a limited risk of collision because there's not that many aircraft in the sky, and the sky is so big that you're not really going to come across it very often. Navigation is pretty cinch because, frankly, you just pick up a railway line and follow it, and in some cases it was that straightforward. You can take shots of the stars for a little bit of navigation as well, because you've got beautiful clear skies more often than not. So actually, it's relatively straightforward. Then suddenly, you're thrust into war-torn Britain. You come back to Britain, darkened skies, crowded skies, risk of collisions is enormous, risk of being shot at by your own ground defences is there. It's a risk. So is being coned in searchlights. That's a risk. Being shot at by intruders, so actually German aircraft coming over to Britain to try and catch bombers unaware when they're tired and they're coming into land. Now, you're flying in all those conditions, also navigating when you can't see. Nothing's lit up. You can't see a railway line in the dark. You can't see a town in the dark. So it is a really rude awakening, and it must actually have been terrifying in part, some of these guys coming back, because it really, the contrast would have been huge. And indeed, an awful lot of people were killed in training at what they call the operational training units. And well, the advanced flying units is what they went to first, just to hone their skills, get them used to flying in war-torn Britain. They then went to the operational training units to prepare them to actually go to a frontline squadron. Now Lionel, all of his training up until this point has been on single engines, single-engined aircraft. And that's important because he will have been expecting at this point to have gone on to fighters. So the fighters at the time are definitely the Spitfire. The Hurricane is still around, the famous Hurricane for the Battle of Britain. Still one of the best aircraft ever in the Second World War. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, kids. So he would have been looking to go to a Spitfire squadron, and he would have been very excited at that proposition. He actually went to a fighter training school, one of the bits he did. So it's all looking like he is going to be flying the best fighter aircraft around at the time. And he then gets his posting, and he's posted to a squadron he's never heard of, which is 515 Squadron. He might have been, there were some squadrons around at the time, like 74 Squadron, Tiger Squadron, and Number 1 Squadron. There were some fighter squadrons that would have been well known and would have been where you would want to have been heading because of the tradition that they'd already built up. But no, he finds himself going to a squadron he's never heard of. And worst of all, he's still going to fly a single-engine aircraft, but it's an aircraft called a Bolt & Paul Defiant. Now, for those who have no idea what a Bolt & Paul Defiant is, if I explained it along the lines of, it's like a Hurricane, so it's a single-engined aircraft with a pilot, but rather than having 4 machine guns in each wing, so 8 machine guns or a couple of cannon or what have you, it's actually got a turret. Okay, it's got a power-operated turret that is behind the cockpit. So you've actually got 2 men in this single-engined aircraft. You've got the pilot, and you've got a gunner operating a turret. It's the sort of turret you would have expected to see, if you want to envisage it, it's the sort of turret you would have seen on a bomber, on a Lancaster or a Halifax, that sort of thing. So as you can imagine, you've got two men, you've got a turret. This is not the fastest aircraft in the world, okay? But there was some genius at some point decided that the concept of a turreted fighter was a good concept. Because it could maneuver itself into position, the pilot working well with the gunner and shoot down the fighters and whatever. Unfortunately, it didn't prove to be a stunning success. It had a modicum of success, but it was fairly quickly relegated to a nighttime role, where it did do well as a night fighter, because as a night fighter, speed wasn't quite so essential. And certainly it was fast enough to keep up and go faster than the German bombers. So it found itself a role. But by 1942, 1943, this aircraft is pretty much obsolete. It's being relegated to sort of target towing duties at training schools and what have you. So can you imagine the letdown of somebody who has every right to believe he's going on to the finest of fastest fighters? Nice bit of alliteration there. Nice. And he finds himself with this turkey. It must have just been heartbreaking for him.
Yeah, being trained up and queued up to drive a Ferrari and then being given a Reliant Robin.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. With all due respect to Reliant Robin owners and other Trabant type drivers out there, clearly. But no, it would have been soul destroying for him. We don't get, unfortunately, his letters at that point stopped, so we don't know. But I know from talking to contemporaries at that time that it's fair to assume that that's how he would have felt.
Yeah, and I wonder how he would have communicated that to Dad as well. You know, the hero pilot is building up to this, and then suddenly you're stuck in this chunk, essentially.
That's a really good point. I'm not quite sure. I mean, what sort of what's the word? What made things better for him, though, but again, he wouldn't have been able to communicate any of this, was actually he quickly learned that the squadron he'd gone to was actually a very secret squadron, and that the role that they were fulfilling was a very secret role. So I'd like to think that some of his disappointment was maybe balanced by, well, actually, I'm doing something which is quite hush-hush and secret. So in a way, there's a kudos to doing that. The downside being that he wouldn't have been able to tell his mum and dad anything about what he was actually doing.
Yeah, and even towards the end of the letters, I'm sure there are quite a few bits that start being redacted, right? But,
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, they would have been edited severely at that point. But actually, most of the aircrew were bright enough at that point not to put in anything of any significance anyway.
Of course. So, from joining 515 until the end, what happens then?
Yeah, sure. Well, he actually spent a long time on the squadron. So, I'll explain what 515 were doing, because it's complicated, but actually it's fascinating what they were doing, and it's part of the air war where I would consider myself a historian relatively well up on all things RAF. I came across things that I'd never come across before. So again, this added to the excitement of the book and why I wanted to work with you on it. So 515 were flying what were called moonshine and mandrill operations, and what a moonshine was, they were very different things. So they started with moonshine. And what a moonshine was they had a secret piece of equipment in the aircraft that was operated by the gunner. And what they were able to do was it effectively gave the impression that when a single aircraft was in the sky, it gave the impression that it was another dozen or so aircraft actually in and around. So what you could do is you could send off a dozen or so Defiants, all operating this equipment, and it gave the impression to the German radar operators that that was a force of 100, 150 aircraft. So it was a spoof. Effectively, it was a spoof. Now, why that's critical is because this is 1942, early 1943. The war isn't necessarily going that well. It's okay. It's looking better than it was, but the second front, the opening of the second front, is still a long way off. So one of the ways that we could take the war to the Germans was through the bombing war, but also through daylight operations. We would attack military targets in the daylight with light and medium bombers. They were often escorted by large numbers of fighter aircraft. We would attack airfields mainly, that sort of thing. We would try and shoot up airfields, railway depots, railway installations, anything that was sort of infrastructure that could disrupt the sort of German military, we would attack. But clearly, when you're operating in daylight, there are considerable dangers. The German fighter force at this point is still an impressive force as well. So the idea of actually sending off a spoof and to try and get the Germans to come up and intercept the spoof rather than the actual raid was obviously thoroughly desirable and proven. It worked. The contemporary reports demonstrate it worked. They demonstrate how German fighters have scrambled to go and attack things that didn't exist. But this is incredibly dangerous for the Defiant crews, because it's all very well sitting there going, Yarbu sucks, hello chaps, we're here. And then you're thinking, oh my goodness, they're actually on their way, they're coming, and we're not in the fastest aircraft. So they literally put the aircraft into a dive and dive for home. So that was one of the crucial bits they did was moonshine. What it evolved to do as well was something called mandrel, which was another piece of technology again, but this involved flying at night. So moonshine was fundamentally a daytime thing as a spoof. What mandrel was effectively a screen. It created a screen which blanked out the German radar for a period of time. They would have to fly near all the German radar installations and blank them all out effectively. It would create a screen through which hundreds of our bombers could pass and not be seen. Yeah. Amazing. So, absolutely fantastic. So these guys would have saved hundreds of lives, by the way, absolutely hundreds of lives of our bomber crew, because the more you could prevent the Germans from detecting where you were and where you were going, obviously the better. The safer it was going to, well, you can't use a word like safe, but the better it was going to be. But again, this is incredibly difficult and dangerous for the Defiant, for the 515 Squadron boys, because when they were doing all the jamming, effectively, let's call it jamming for simplicity's sake, that would go on for maybe half an hour, 40 minutes or so. The gunner would have to drop inside the cockpit to operate the kit. While he's operating the set, he cannot receive any information from the ground controllers. So the ground controller cannot warn him if German night fighters are in sight. So, but not only can the Germans, ground controller not warn him, but the gunner isn't in his seat. He's not looking out for German aircraft either, because he's down in the cockpit. So you can imagine how dangerous this was. And that is evidenced by the losses that they suffered. They did lose a serious amount of crews. They also, sadly, the Defiant not being, as I say, being a little bit outdated at this point, they suffered from engine problems. They suffered dreadfully from undercarriage problems. References are 2 a penny in the operational record books at the time of undercarriage collapsing on landing and the like. So you haven't got the most trustworthy aircraft. You've got probably the most dangerous role going on in the whole of Bomber Command at that time, I would argue. And yet no one knows about you. No one's heard of you. Historically, no one's written about it. So again, from my perspective, what a joy, and how fabulous that Lionel is actually doing something so crucial. Yeah.
I mean, the more we go through it, the more you see all these amazing connections that go right through to all of Dad's shows. The handsome hero pilot, bit of a hit with the ladies, who is involved in secret operations saving lives, and the Hollywood connection, the filmmaking. I mean, there's just so much that then leads directly through. But of course, this all had a very unhappy tragic ending, Sean. So what happened to Lionel?
Well, Lionel, in fairness, he completed his first tour of operations. So he flew about 32, 33 operations, which, as I say, do remember that in a typical flight of maybe 2.5 hours, 3-hour flight, they would be in danger for probably 90% of that. So, it took an incredible toll in terms of strain and mental stress and what have you. And seeing your chums as well going missing, that would have taken its toll as well. Finally, the squadron was withdrawn. Their sort of duties complete, as it were. People kept using Mandrill, but in different ways, and so they were re-equipped, or they were going to be re-equipped with the Mosquito, which was the de Havilland Mosquito, twin-engined, famous as being the wooden wonder, plywood construction, built in Hatfield by de Havilland's. One of the most versatile, if not the most versatile aircraft of the Second World War. Fighter, bomber, reconnaissance aircraft, you name it, it did it. Fabulous aircraft. That would have been really exciting. They would have now thought, well, it's almost like we've served our apprenticeship, we've earned our spurs, and we've earned our role now. We're going to get Mosquitoes. Must have been fantastic. So they converted onto 2 engines, because until this point he's only been flying single-engined aircraft. They flew Beaufighters, which was an early night fighter and torpedo bomber that we had. And in fact, Lionel had a couple of scrapes there. He had a serious crash landing, which he just managed to get away with, which must have been serious because it's actually written up in the operation record book, and the level of detail in there is quite significant. So he was a lucky chap to get away with that one. But then what happened was Mosquitoes came along. So they converted to Mosquitoes, and the role of 515 then was effectively what they called an intruder squadron. So what they would do is they would fly ahead of the bomber force all at night time, and they would circle around the fighter bases where the German night fighters were known to be, and they would literally shoot them up. They would, if they could see them coming into land or taking off, they would shoot them up. If they couldn't, they'd try and shoot up the flak defences, the anti-aircraft defences as it were. They'd try and shoot up the hangars. They would shoot up everything they could that came into their sights to prevent those aircraft, those night fighters, getting into the sky and harrying our bombers. Again, these are incredibly dangerous operations. This is very low level. As you can imagine, this is all low level work. Swooping down and machine gunning and cannoning flak concentrations is done at sort of 200 feet or so, and at sort of 300 plus miles an hour. So actually it must be exhilarating to be the pilot, but it must have been hair raising as well. So that 515 fulfilled another fantastic role in doing that. Sadly, Lionel was literally lost on what we think was his first trip. We believe that he may have done what they called a freshman trip, which was like gone out with an experienced navigator or what have you. He probably did that. I think it's fair to assume he did. But on his first trip, all on his own, sadly he was lost. Whether he was hit by flak, we don't know. Or whether he simply flew into the grounds, whether he misjudged it. I think the former is probably more likely. The flak defences were really quite something over those fighter bases at the time. And I would think, unfortunately, he probably got hit by flak too low, certainly too low to bail out, and crashed, and sadly him and his navigator were killed.
Such a tragic ending for such a positive character overall.
Yeah.
Was he shot down over Holland?
Yeah, I think it was Venlo. I think was the base that he was certainly attacking. So
because he's
a lot of the fighter bases were then in Holland, because they were meant to be as close as they could to the German cities without all being in Germany, to try and harry the bombers as they were coming in and then when they were going out again. So it must have been. He must have. Well. Can't possibly say he must have felt cheated, but to have come so far, to have served such a fantastic apprenticeship, to then get, again, a bit like being given the star prize at school and then actually not not be able to then go on and fulfil that. Must have been heartbreaking for those who surrounded him and those who loved him.
Well, that was 1944.
1944, yeah.
So painfully close, really, in relative terms, to the end of the war as well.
Yeah, he had a year or so to go. I mean, he was unlucky. We weren't losing that many aircraft at that time in that role.
Yeah,
but that's not to say it wasn't dangerous. Yeah, it was the night of the 26th to the 27th of April, 1944. So D-Day is but 6 weeks away at that point. So the opening of the second front is just came in June, obviously.
Gosh, and only a couple of weeks after Dad's birthday as well.
Oh, is it right? Okay, yeah. Not the sort of news anyone would want to receive.
No, so they get their letter saying, sorry, missing in action, I think it was. They would have received
a telegram saying missing, possibly presumed killed, because it all depends on what anyone had seen at that time. But that would have been heartrending. Then that would have been followed. The initial telegram would have been followed by a letter from his commanding officer to confirm that he was missing, and that if they got any news, because sometimes happy things did happen, sometimes miraculously they did get away with it, and the Red Cross the International Red Cross would ultimately feed that back, and you'd know someone was safe. But sadly, that didn't happen often enough, and it didn't happen in Lionel's case.
No, not in this case. And Dad carried that with him for the rest of his life. He could never really talk about it. I never knew about any of these elements other than the fact that Lionel was killed and that he flew a Mosquito the last point. And that's all I ever knew, because Dad found it so difficult to talk about. So it's amazing that this record has come to light, and thank you for picking through it, and thanks to your mum for transcribing it.
Yeah, well done.
All that sort of stuff. I mean,
it was genuinely, I have to say, I love writing. It's only a part-time thing. I don't do it for a profession, but when you get a story like that, it's an absolute treat and a privilege. I am that classic generation. I am a Thunderbirds Stingray generation. We loved it. I loved it as a kid. My brothers loved it as a kid. So to also, without getting overly emotional about these sort of things too, I know what my brothers mean to me, and I get a sense therefore what Lionel must have meant to Gerry. So to be able to write that book was, as I say, a genuine privilege.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant, and I think in summary, you can just kind of take away the fact that you cannot downplay the critical role that all of these letters and that short period of time really had, the influence it had on Dad and his future career. So I mean, every hero pilot character, it is Lionel. The womanizing Troy Tempest is Lionel. Yeah. International rescue to some degree, and the secret way they operated and the way they saved lives and the technology they were carrying. Well, that's Lionel on 515. Throughout, his influence is keenly felt. So I'm just very pleased that's out there. And I really feel like this should be a film. It should be a film about Lionel's life, because it's just so cool. And then the onward impact. So, yeah. Sean, is there anything else you would like to add?
Happy Christmas and have a great New Year. I suppose that's
Well, this is New Year's Eve. So,
right, okay. I hope you had a great Christmas, and I hope you have a fantastic New Year.
Fantastic. And if you want to pick up a copy of the book, I think we've got them on the Gerry Anderson store. But what's Steve publisher called? Fighting High.
High Publishing. You'll certainly be able to get it through their website. You should be able to get it through Amazon and all those sort of things as well.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic book. And if people want to find you, Sean, on Twitter and stuff, are you on there?
Yeah, I am on Twitter actually. Sean D Feast, I believe. I've got a Facebook page, so come and have a look. Come and be a friend. Don't be a stranger.
You may regret saying that, Sean.
Well, that's all right. I've got some great friends out there who, in fairness, they tell me great stories, and they're a fantastic source of information. And if I can ever help anybody as well discover more about their relatives, their loved ones who did something, as long as it's RAF related and Bomber Command especially, if possible, I'll always try and help if I can.
Fantastic, Sean. Sean, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody's enjoyed hearing the story as well. So
fantastic. Well, we must have a beer at some time, Jamie. We haven't had a beer for a little while, so we must have a little meet up, I would suggest, in the new year.
All right, done. And then we can start working on the Thunderbird and Bomber Command screenplay.
Yeah, love it. Love the idea.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
Well, how lovely.
I really enjoyed that chat with Sean. I have to say, you could probably hear how much I enjoyed it. I could have chatted to him for hours, and Sean said afterwards, I could easily do that all over again and come up with loads more stuff. If you enjoyed the chat and you want to learn more about Lionel's life and the way he influenced Dad's shows, then you can grab a copy of the book, A Thunderbird in Bomber Command, and you can get it from the Gerry Anderson store. You can get it from Amazon, wherever. But it's really interesting, and you don't have to have a particular interest in military aviation or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just a fascinating human story with incredible ups and downs, and obviously a very sad end. But the very fact that Lionel's life inspired Dad in that way, in so many ways,
it's wonderful.
It's just fascinating. Yeah. So, really, really worth a read. There's copies ready to go at the Gerry Anderson store if you want to get yourself a belated Christmas present.
Lovely. Well done, Jamie. What a lovely end to 2018. That was a great interview. Very nice. Yeah,
gosh,
very good.
Isn't that amazing? We've done 6 months of podcasts.
That's right. I mean, who's next? Who do we have next for the next?
Well, this is the slight problem is that I don't know. But there's a part of me that's actually quite interested to do a chat with you, Richard.
Is there a proper chat? Without you taking the mickey all the time, you mean?
Yeah, seriously. And I won't even mention your wrinkly old Orin. But, just actually about your career and Space Precinct. And I know it's covered in the book, Space Precinct Unmasked by Richard James, signed copies of which are available in the Gerry Anderson store. But it's always better to hear it from the horse's mouth. Okay. I haven't bothered reading your book, I need to find out somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well just ask me.
Exactly, and we've got that chat with Charlotte that you did, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is in the archive. So maybe we could do a little intercut version of that. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
All right.
But let's see. There's loads more to come in the new year. Yeah. I've got John Culshaw and a few others lined up.
Great.
And if you've got any suggestions, let us know.
Yes.
Tweet the celebrity you think might be interested and
let them know.
CC us in
so
we can see.
That's right.
Because you never know, things happen like that.
That's right. And also, Jamie, you often say that you have some, obviously lots of archive interview with your dad, of course, that might be I'm not reluctant to bring it out, but obviously, as you can imagine, it's a slightly strange experience for me combing through, tens and tens of hours of material, just hearing Dad in my ears. Yes,
it's very strange, but no, we've got some lovely material, and we must get it out there in due course, and we will.
Yeah.
So yes, there's so much more to come in 2019, not just on the podcast, but beyond, as we've discussed already.
Yeah.
But we should round off 2019 with many people's favourite part of the show, Richard.
What, the end? No. You mean Chris Dale's Randomizer.
The bit before, the Randomizer. Because, Chris has gone to a lot of effort this year, taking us all around the Gerry Anderson universe with Marina.
Brilliant.
Crashing his Eagle and ending up down dodgy alleyways.
Yeah, that's right.
All sorts. But he's really got himself into trouble for this one.
Uh-oh.
So let's hope he gets out alive.
Uh-oh.
I convene this court-martial by the authority invested in me under Article 183 of our Charter.
Hello everyone. Well, a rather serious start to today, unfortunately. You see, it's not gone unnoticed that throughout 2018, certain Gerry Anderson shows have been turning up more often on the Randomizer than others, and indeed several have yet to appear at all. Hence the reason I've been put on trial today. But it's all right, my good pal Marina is here to make the case for my defence. And I've just noticed the flaw in that plan.
The defending officer may proceed.
Right. Your generalship, could we request a short recess?
You didn't finish it.
Well, technically we didn't actually start, but...
What do you expect me to do? Stand up and give them a couple of choruses of Love Her Come Back?
Oh, could you? Oh, that would be ever so helpful if you could manage to
You think I'm a pig-headed cretinous slub, don't you?
No. Well... No. Well, no. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Look, I tell you what. Save us wasting time on this whole trial thing. How about we just put my future to the Randomizer? You let the prosecution, Dr. Jackson here, press the button today, and if the randomizer chooses a series we've not yet seen come up, then I can go free. And if it doesn't, then you can go ahead and execute me. Ah, see? Marina's waving her hands frantically. I can see she fully supports this plan.
Very well. The prosecuting officer will proceed.
Yes, General. One more.
Oh, I've got a lot riding on this today. I wonder which episode it'll be.
I can't begin to imagine.
It better be from a new series, otherwise I'm dead. Okay, give me the bad news.
Well, I'm afraid you will live.
Well, that's a relief. Let's see what brand new series we get to watch today. Ooh. Well, yes, it's about time Fireball XL5 made an appearance. So here's the mystery of the TA2.
Okay.
Well, what a way to see in the new year with a brand new series on the Randomizer. And I honestly didn't think we would get another one before the end of the year. I thought, Dick Spanner to kick off December, that was a nice enough surprise. But now we have our very first Fireball XL5. And I've got to say, I loved this show as a kid. I really believe that this show has got something almost magical that just instantly plugs into kids even today. I remember within the last year, maybe two, Jamie posted that clip, didn't he, on Fab Live of the children. I can't remember what school it was at, but they'd been watching Fireball and they were dancing around to the theme song. They loved it, and same with me when I was a kid. I had Volume 4 and Volume 6 of the Fireball XL5 VHS range. One of the episodes on Volume 6 was indeed this one, Mystery of the TA2. Looking at Fireball today, I love this opening. This opening starts off so dramatic, and the end title song also is a lot of fun. Everything in between, though, the show itself doesn't really hold my interest much anymore, to the extent that it's probably been a good few years since I even looked at any of them. But since this is an episode that I am familiar with, or was familiar with as a kid, including that nice bit of UFO end theme here that was reused for various programs later on. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how we get on with our first Randomizer XL5.
Object, dead ahead.
Switch to free float, Robert.
Switch to a free float.
I was going to make a comment on why exactly Venus was co-piloting at the start of this episode, but now Robert has arrived from somewhere. Maybe he was on break. Maybe he needs to go to the loo. But I wouldn't put Venus near the controls of anything. I don't have much confidence in her judgment, her ability, her anything really. She's always fairly useless. Oh, they've left her behind on XL5 while they go to look at this strange space object they've discovered.
But it would be real boss if we could solve the mystery of the TA2, Steve.
Yeah, I reckon you've got something.
Boss. Oh, there's that.
Okay, work out the
that's one of the things I don't like about this show. That sort of would-be cool-ish jargon. It doesn't come across as cool at all these days. It just looks kind of quaint. And none of the other shows really tried that, I don't think. I mean, the closest I can think of is on Space Precinct, when things were orbital and all that stuff that Brogan's kids used to go on about. That sounded terrible even at the time. I wonder if this, or this Tootie and Real Boss, if that sounded similarly quaint back in the early 60s when this was first on, or if people found it enjoyable.
What next, Steve?
We'll all go across to the space wreck, Professor, and see what we can find out.
Well, they found the wrecked TA2, which, considering they were saying, we'll never find it, they found it in about 40 seconds, which is quite impressive, especially for the XL5 crew. Now we have a shot of the three of them spacewalking over to the other ship, and of course they've taken their oxygen pills and they've got their jetpacks on and their little legs are just kicking around. And I find this bit quite sort of charming, the way they just kind of kick their legs to move around. It is quite sweet, and also I'm looking at these shots of the interior of the abandoned TA2, and what I love about XL5, and what I think would be lost if it were ever colorized, and I know they did colorize one episode, but there's a lot of very atmospheric shots in XL5, lots of huge shadows and some unusual lighting effects on the characters' faces. When this show tries to be scary, it really kind of works, and I don't know if it works because it succeeded in the way that they were hoping, or if it just, because it's so old, because it is black and white, it just looks kind of creepy in a way that isn't really relevant to us anymore. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense or not. I would say that with the wah-wah music playing in the background, I'm probably not making much sense. I apologise.
They didn't have oxygen pills in those days.
No, but
they had things like
spacesuits. He would have carried air.
Yeah, I was going to say spacesuits. Yeah. Okay, this is you beat me to it again, Steve. You are
good.
You're a clever man, Colonel Zodiac. I'll get you yet.
One of the atomic motors exploded.
Oh, of course it did. Because if you plug an atomic reactor into anything in the Gerry Anderson universe, it's either there to explode or threaten to explode. Very rarely will it do what it was actually supposed to do.
But it all happened nearly 50 years ago, Steve.
Maybe so, but we'll go and look. It's just possible he could still be alive.
All right, Steve. I'll go and get
this happened 50 years ago. I'm watching this more than 50 years after it was made.
Cold and completely covered in ice.
Oh, I love that in XL5, though. We're going to the planet Arctan. Well, of course, it's very cold. The planet was what was the desert planet? Aridon. Aridon or Iridius? Oh, that was I'm thinking of the chase now. I love that shot of Fireball Jr. disconnecting from the main ship and heading on down. Even though the smoke sort of seems to cover suddenly sort of blasts back into the interior of the main ship and would probably suffocate anybody in the little sort of observation booth or whatever's on the top. But XL5 is a lovely model. Really, really lovely model. Very simplistic, but beautifully designed. It's really appealing.
If Colonel Denton did manage to land here, Steve, I wouldn't give much for his chance of survival.
Sure looks that way.
Yes, this is where we need our doctor of space medicine to confirm that someone who didn't have any winter survival gear could not survive for 50 years on an ice planet. I'm so glad we have you along. Your assistance is invaluable, and one day we may actually have need of it. So the XL5 crew are exploring the planet Arctan on their little hoverbikes, and of course, when you say hoverbikes, we think International Rescue, because the Tracy brothers used to rock around on those little red hoverbikes. I've got to say, though, I think I prefer the design of the XL5 hoverbikes, or jetmobiles, I should say, that's what they call them. The International Rescue ones are just kind of big and bulky, and these XL5 ones are nice and sleek and... Oh, here we go. Right, the ice is about to crack under the weight of Venus's jetmobile. She's checking her watch.
Time flies. I must get back to Matthew and Steve.
But she's dropped her glove, and here comes a very odd scream from Venus.
Oh dear.
That wasn't it. Remember in the first episode she screamed, and it was like it wasn't Sylvia Anderson, it was a woman really screaming. This is Sylvia. I don't want to sound rude or anything, especially since it looked like Venus has cracked her head quite badly on the way down, but that scream always sounded to me, even as a kid, like a man.
There's been no word from Colonel Zodiac.
Call him again, Lieutenant.
Either a man or Venus just really wasn't interested in the fact that she was falling to her death. It was like, okay, this is happening, but...
Howdy, folks.
This is Commander Zero to XL5. I am waiting for your report.
And of course, I'm recording this a few weeks after the passing of John Bluthal, who provided the voice of Commander Zero, and Jock, and countless other characters in Fireball XL5, and I always really liked Commander Zero. I think probably still even today, he's my favourite of the XL5 characters because he is on such a short fuse with everybody, and unlike other Anderson commanders, the short-tempered, crusty commanders, his irritation is kind of justified by the stupidity of the people around him most of the time. And it's a shame, really, that
Venus, are you receiving me?
that John was only used for this one series. It would have been great if he'd been held back for Stingray as well, and maybe Thunderbirds. He was a very, very talented. Oh, Venus is calling for help from the hole.
Matt!
Oh. No, I can't find her, Steve. We should probably go home. It's past lunchtime, you know.
Venus isn't answering her radio at all. I'm worried, Matt.
Well, we better go and look for her, Steve.
Wait, what? If you're only now looking for her, what have you been doing? Why? I know you're looking for the other guy, but you should know that Venus can't survive for more than 30 seconds on her own without getting into trouble. Oh God, the XL5 crew are actually taking their jetmobiles down into the crevice that Venus fell into. I was expecting them to climb off and climb down or get a rope or something. This is rather impressive thinking from the XL5 team.
Steve, if Venus fell down here...
We don't know that she did. Let's go up.
Well, we know that she did. Are you saying she's dead? Oh, I'm gripped with mild indifference at the thought of us losing Venus. Whatever will we do? Hire someone competent, I guess.
What is that stuff, Steve?
I don't know. It's...
We should stand here and keep breathing it in, though. Oh, no, they fainted. Steve has fainted with his eyes open, though, so it looks like he could be dead, which means that Zuni is, by default, the new commander of Fireball XL5. All hail Colonel Zuni.
You are our prisoners, Earth people. We knew you came to steal our king away from us.
Okay, the XL5 crew have been captured by the I don't know what we'd call them, the Arctons or the Arcturans or well, sorry, these aliens are an amazing design. They're supposed to look like they're made of ice. Their arms are quite thin, so when I laughed just then it was because one of them gestured rather camply with his wrist, because his wrist is all of about 1 millimeter thick. I love the designs of the aliens on this show, and also Stingray. There are very few of them that look anything less than hugely imaginative. I mean, occasionally you get some that are just like more or less human with a bit less hair or something. But then you get characters like these two who are just so out of the norm for a sci-fi show. And now the XL5 crew are being pelted with icicles that are falling from the ceiling, because they're pegged out on these slabs of ice, and that seemed to happen a lot to the XL5 crew. They would be tied down to slabs and either have things thrown at them or have water poured in or something like that. This is rather similar to
A couple of minutes is going to be enough for me.
To the later scene in Stingray in Search of the Taj Mahal, when I think Troy and Atlanta and Phones are in that sort of trap where the spikes are coming down. It's a similar sort of situation here with the icicles looming over the XL5 crew. But our frozen friends have now returned.
Immediately.
With their king.
No arguments, Junto.
Oh, I love these frozen guys. They're so sweet. Oh, reuse of the Ice Temple set from Last of the Xanadus there.
Please come in.
Of course, this is Colonel Denton, as played by John Bluthal.
Why did you come to this planet?
Would I be right in assuming that you are Denton from the TA2?
You would be right.
You mean this is Colonel Denton, Steve?
Yes, young lady.
You mean when you said that this is Denton, that you actually meant that this is Denton? I think Venus's brain just imploded there. I think it just lapped itself. Oh, Venus, you are truly something special. I'm going to enjoy having you to deal with from now on, I think.
I guess your people were afraid we'd take you away from them.
They need me, Steve Zodiac, and I must stay.
I really like the design of these ice people, but I also like the characterization that goes into them, with this idea that Denton has become their king and they are so helpless that they are almost, I think he says later, that they're almost like children.
Goodbye, Steve Zodiac. You will never know how much I wanted to return to Earth with you. But my people, they are like children, and I could never leave them.
Although if you could bring some supplies every once in a while, I'd appreciate it. No? Okay. I'll just die here then. Goodbye. Oh, lovely shot there of XL5 passing by the TA2 on their way home, the wreck of the TA2. It's very almost poignant, I think, which is quite unusual for this show. Now XL5 landing back at Space City, always a joy to watch.
Okay. So you solved the mystery of the TA2. But that doesn't give you a right to take pets into space. It's against all the rules.
And we're 25 episodes in. I really should have mentioned this before now, that we don't have the Lazoon on the ship.
Well, I'll admit he's kind of cute, but... Well, see here. This is the World Space Patrol.
And that's why I've sat him down behind my desk with all these dangerous buttons he could be pressing.
Welcome home, Venus, Steve, Professor. And as for you, Zuni... welcome home.
Okay, that's quite a sweet note to end on, but I don't see why Zuni needed to be in this episode, why we're ending on him when... I don't know, that scene of Denton saying goodbye to XL5 on the planet's surface was kind of an even better note to end on. But anyway, that was our first Fireball XL5 for the Randomizer, and... yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think it helps that it was an episode that I was familiar with from childhood anyway. But it's still, I think it still holds up. This episode, really, I don't know how much the rest of the show will hold up. We will find out over the coming weeks and months and years. Who wrote this? Dennis Spooner. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, nice and pacey. There's a nice sense of mystery and discovery here. And yeah, I'm quite... I think this one still holds up rather well. What do you want me to do now? My heart would be a fireball, 'cause you would be my Venus of the stars.
Fireball XL5 is very cute, isn't it,
Yeah,
Richard?
you see, I don't know Fireball XL5 at all, I must say. I've not seen a single episode, I don't think.
Well,
yes,
there's something you need to change.
I know.
Obviously, you'll be inspired to watch it, having listened to the Randomizer.
Yeah.
You should check out the colorized episode, although Chris says in there that black and white is part of its magic and atmosphere they managed to produce. There is a colorized episode that Network did on Blu-ray called it's the Day in the Life of a Space General.
Oh, lovely.
And it's beautifully done. It's HD. It looks stunning.
Ooh.
And obviously it's got, all the cool kind of Anderson aspects.
Yeah.
And that amazing end theme.
Yes, great.
You know the one?
Yes, I do.
Do you know the words, Richard?
No, I don't.
Yeah, of course you do. I wish I was a spaceman, the fastest guy alive. It's great. Anyway, which I taught myself to play on the piano a few weeks ago.
You didn't. Well, we've got to hear that, Jamie. You can't just drop that in.
I can do the Newsy News to it. Anyway,
absolutely.
We'll think about that for 2019. But not all of you will know that Robert the Robot was voiced by none other than Gerry Anderson.
Yes, that's right.
So, but he wasn't credited because he wasn't a member of Equity.
Oh, really?
There were all sorts of issues over union type stuff for the voice actors.
Yeah.
But no, he put a little what he described as a vibrator to his throat.
Yes.
And did all the On Our Way Home, but with the vibrator going, and there you go.
Now, is that the only example of your dad appearing in one of his own series?
I think he also voiced, what was it? A kind of satellite voice in Captain Scarlet.
Okay.
I think.
Chris
But otherwise, that's it. Yeah, I'm going to be lynched for not knowing exactly what that is.
Yeah, nice.
But,
great.
There you go. So there's a little tidbit for those of you who didn't know. Most of you probably did.
Yeah.
You're all smart and well-informed fans. But if not, there you go. There's some news for you. So yes, thanks, Chris. 5XO5 is lovely. Let's see what 2019 will bring us for the next randomizer.
Yeah, well done, Chris. That's great.
And Richard.
There we are then. That's a year done, isn't it?
It's the end.
Yeah.
But the moment has been.
I knew that was coming.
I hadn't planned that. It wasn't in the script, as you'll know. But that's 2018. That's all of our pods for 2018 done.
Yeah, brilliant. So I would just like to say a personal thank you to everyone who's listened to us over the last 27, 28 weeks and for sharing us on Twitter and engaging with us and sending us your lovely emails. They're always a joy to read, and I'm sorry we can't read out every single one. And thank you to everyone out there for continuing to spread the word. It really is a very exciting time to be a Gerry Anderson fan because, as we know, Jamie, there's brand new Gerry Anderson stuff being made right now, isn't there?
Yes. Hashtag that.
Exactly. So do continue to join us throughout 2019 and, I suppose just remains for us to say Happy New Year, doesn't it, Jamie?
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone. Have a great final bit of 2018 and have a wonderful 2019 and we'll see you there.
Yeah. See you next year, Jamie.
See you next year, Richard.
Bye.
Bye.
Stage 1 complete.
Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
What's that I can see? There's a little silhouette of something in the box, in the Tupperware. Inside it.
It's my Sonic Screwdriver Sport.
What's in there now? I can't believe you've got a Sonic Screwdriver Sport.
Of course I have. It's a roast potato.
Oh, I thought so.
Ladies and gentlemen of your volunteer company, this is your Act 1 beginner's call.
I've got to go.
Please stand by. All technical staff, LX, stage management, wardrobe and sound. This is your Act 1 beginner's call.
That's the beginners. That means I've got to get onto stage and do a show, Jamie.
Hang on. Okay.
I haven't got my makeup on or anything.
No, you need to go.
I'll grab the wig as I go. That'll do, and I'll just put the costume on. I know. Bye. I'm gonna go. Bye.
Bye, Richard. Good luck.